The moment Senator Lindsey Graham laughed during Jasmine Crockett's testimony about voter suppression, you could see the fire ignite in her eyes. What happened next? A political knockout that stunned the Senate, silenced the crowd, and left Graham visibly shaken. This wasn't just a heated exchange. It was a masterclass in preparation, principle, and power. And trust me, you'll want to see every second of it. If you care about democracy, truth, and watching arrogance get humbled, hit that subscribe button now. You don't want to miss what happens next. The moment Senator Lindsey Graham laughed during Jasmine Crockett's testimony, everything changed. You could see it in her eyes like a fire being lit. She paused for just a second, looked up, and what came next completely flipped the room. A simple chuckle, meant to belittle her story, turned into a tidal wave that Graham never saw coming. The hearing room went silent. Reporters froze mid-note. You could feel the tension through the screen. This was not just another heated exchange. This was a complete shift in power, live on national television. And it was all caught on camera. If you care about truth, accountability, and watching a masterclass in shutting down arrogance, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. What Jasmine Crockett did next was so precise, so powerful, that even her critics had to respect it. Trust me, you are going to want to see every second of this moment. Senator Lindsey Graham has been in the Senate for years. He is known for his strong opinions and his ability to dominate a conversation. He speaks with confidence and rarely backs down. Over time, he has built a reputation as someone who sticks with his party, no matter what the issue is. Whether it is judicial nominations or voting laws, Graham usually plays to his base. On the other side of the room sat Representative Jasmine Crockett. She is newer to Congress but comes with a strong background. She used to be a public defender and civil rights attorney. That is important because it shows how deeply she understands the law and the people affected by it. She knows what injustice looks like, not just in theory, but in real life. The hearing was about voting rights. More specifically, it focused on recent state-level laws that many believe are making it harder for minority communities to vote. Texas was at the center of the conversation, and Crockett represents a district there. Her presence was not random. She came to speak for people who feel like their voices are being pushed out of the process. What made the moment powerful was how different the two sides were. Graham seemed like he was going through the motions. Crockett, on the other hand, looked like someone with a mission. Her tone was calm, but serious. Her body language said she was ready. The room was about to feel the weight of that difference. Jasmine Crockett did not just appear out of nowhere. She built her reputation step by step, case by case. Before she ever stepped into Congress, she stood in front of judges as a public defender. That means she spent years defending people who could not afford an attorney. People who were ignored. People who were written off. She learned how to fight for them. She learned how to speak with precision. And she learned how to stay calm when everything was on the line. Those courtroom skills shaped her into who she is today. She knows how to cut through noise. She knows how to read a room. And when she speaks, it is never about showing off. It is about making sure the truth is heard. That is the difference between someone who talks for attention and someone who talks for justice. Crockett never wastes a word. Every sentence has purpose. Every pause has meaning. When she ran for Congress, a lot of people did not know her name. But that changed quickly. She did not try to fit into the mold. She brought her fire, her facts, and her voice straight into the Capitol. And when she stepped into that hearing room, she brought every bit of that courtroom experience with her. That is what made her so effective. She did not just come with opinions. She came with evidence, with law, with stories of real people who are affected by the policies being debated. Her rise in Congress has not been quiet. She is bold. She asks tough questions. She stands her ground, even when it is uncomfortable. That makes some people nervous. especially people who are used to dominating the room. But Crockett is not there to play politics as usual. She is there to challenge the system, and that is exactly what she did when she faced off with Lindsey Graham. This moment was not about ego, it was about truth. Crockett reminded everyone that strength does not always come with a loud voice or a big title. Sometimes it shows up in the form of a woman, sitting straight, speaking clearly, and refusing to be silenced. As Jasmine Crockett began speaking, the room was tense but quiet. She laid out her points clearly, using facts and examples. It was not emotional. It was professional and direct. But as she kept going, Senator Lindsey Graham leaned back in his chair and let out a small laugh. Not loud, but just enough. He rolled his eyes like her words did not matter. Like this was just another moment to brush off. That was his mistake. It was not just disrespectful. It was revealing. In that moment, Graham showed how little he valued the conversation. Not just what Crockett was saying, but who she was. A black woman, a former public defender, now a congresswoman, speaking on voter suppression. And he laughed. He may have thought it would go unnoticed. Maybe it was just a habit, or maybe he thought she would back down. But Crockett saw it. Everyone saw it. And that one laugh changed everything. It turned a regular hearing into a turning point. A moment where the power in the room quietly shifted, and Crockett took full control of what came next. Jasmine Crockett did not flinch. She heard the laugh. She saw the eye roll, but instead of reacting with anger or raising her voice, she leaned in with calm control. She took a short breath, sat a little straighter, and spoke with even more clarity. That was the moment everything shifted. Her voice stayed steady. She did not get flustered. She did not try to match Graham's dismissiveness. Instead, she doubled down on the truth. She reminded the room that this was not about games or theater. It was about real people who are being silenced at the ballot box. She brought the focus back to families who wait in long lines, seniors who are turned away, communities that have to fight just to be counted. You could feel the shift. People stopped fidgeting, eyes locked on her. Reporters started scribbling faster. Even the senators across from her leaned in a little closer. Crockett was not just testifying anymore. She was leading. Her tone never changed, but her words cut sharper. She laid out the legal consequences of these voter laws. She cited cases, timelines, personal stories, everything backed up by evidence. And through it all, she never looked away from the people in front of her. Especially not Lindsey Graham, she made it clear. Disrespect would not distract her. She was there for the people who elected her. People whose voices have been ignored for too long. And in that moment, Jasmine Crockett took control of the hearing, not by yelling or clapping back, but by holding her ground with dignity and undeniable strength. The energy in the room belonged to her now. Jasmine Crockett did not stop at tone or presence. She brought the facts. Line by line, she laid out the truth about voter suppression. She was not vague, she was specific. She talked about exact laws that had been passed in states across the country. Laws that limit early voting. Laws that reduce drop boxes. Laws that make it harder to register. These were not opinions. These were written bills, signed by governors, already affecting people's lives. She pointed out how certain districts with large black populations had seen polling locations shut down. She gave the numbers. She named the counties. And she made it clear that this was not just a coincidence. It was strategy. Voter suppression today does not always look like it did in the past. There are no poll taxes or literacy tests anymore. But the impact is still the same. Making it harder for some people to vote than others. Crockett quoted court rulings too. Judges who had already flagged these laws as discriminatory. She talked about the Fifth Circuit, the Supreme Court, and the legal battle still ongoing. She referenced the Voting Rights Act, especially the parts that were gutted in recent years. And she explained how those changes opened the door for this new wave of voter restrictions. Then she added stories. Real people. An elderly woman in Georgia who waited 7 hours to vote. A college student in Texas who had to drive across counties because his campus polling place was shut down. Parents who brought kids with them because they had no childcare and still wanted to be heard. These stories made the data come alive. It was no longer just numbers. It was faces and names and lives. And the room listened. The senators who had smirked earlier were now silent. Even Graham had stopped leaning back in his chair. Because it was hard to argue with receipts that deep. Crockett did not just make a speech. She built a case, the way she had done in court so many times before. Every fact had a source. Every example had weight. And every sentence pushed the truth a little further into the open. Crockett was not just defending her position. She was educating the room. She was telling a story that too many people still try to ignore. And she was not going to let it be dismissed with a laugh or an eye roll. Not today. Not in that hearing. Then came the moment that made everyone sit up a little straighter. Jasmine Crockett turned the focus directly on Lindsey Graham, not in a loud way. Not with insults or grandstanding. She just started quoting him. Word for word. Statements he had made in past hearings, interviews, floor speeches. All on the record. She reminded the room that Graham once spoke proudly about protecting the Voting Rights Act, that he used to say every vote matters, and no citizen should face barriers at the ballot box. She read his exact words from years ago. And then, she pulled out his voting record. Crockett pointed out how those past words no longer matched his actions. She showed that when it came time to vote on bills that would restore parts of the Voting Rights Act, Graham said no. When reforms were proposed to expand access to voting, Graham blocked them. He voted against the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. He voted against the Freedom to Vote Act. There was no need to raise her voice. The facts did the work. Crockett was not guessing about his record. She showed the votes, named the bills, quoted the roll calls. She showed that the same man who once claimed to stand for voter protections had quietly walked away from those values, and you could see it hit. Not just Graham, but others on that panel. Because it is one thing to be challenged. It is another to have your own words brought back to you in front of the world. Crockett made it clear. If you are going to laugh at the struggle for equal rights, be ready for someone to remind you of who you used to be and who you have chosen to become. Then Jasmine Crockett did something that changed the entire tone of the room. She started telling real stories, not policy talk, not statistics. Just people. She talked about her grandmother, a woman who raised a family through segregation and hardship. A woman who waited in long lines just to vote because it meant something. Because it was power. Crockett shared how her grandma would dress in her best clothes every election day, even when her legs hurt. Because she believed voting was sacred. Then she told the story of a veteran from her district. A man who served in 3 different tours overseas, who came home proud but tired. And yet, even he had to fight to get a proper voting ID because of new rules that made it harder, not easier, to be counted. Crockett talked about elderly voters, people in rural areas with no access to transportation, who now had to travel miles to reach a polling station. Some had to rely on neighbors. Some gave up entirely. And all of them felt the sting of being ignored. These were not numbers on a chart. These were lives. People who had already worked, already sacrificed, and just wanted to have a say in what happens next. Crockett reminded everyone that behind every debate, every bill, there are families watching. And when lawmakers mock those concerns, or laugh them off, they are laughing at real pain. She gave voice to those who are often left out, the quiet ones. The ones who vote and then go home, hoping someone out there is still fighting for them. In that moment, Crockett became that someone. Not just a congresswoman, but a witness for her community. And the room got quiet again. Then came the moment no one forgot. The moment Jasmine Crockett leaned in, looked straight ahead, and asked. The question that ended it all. She said, "Why is it that every time we talk about protecting the right to vote, it turns into a joke for some of you? Do our communities not deserve the same democracy you enjoy?" The room went still. She was not yelling. She was not angry. She was steady, calm, controlled. And that made it hit harder, because everyone knew exactly who she was talking about. Lindsey Graham had just laughed a few minutes earlier, smirked, rolled his eyes, but now he had no answer, no snark, no laugh. Just silence. Crockett followed up with something sharper. If your vote was ever threatened, would you sit quiet? Or would you be the loudest voice in the room? Her voice did not shake. Her tone stayed level. But you could feel the tension. That was the final blow. Not personal, not dramatic, just real. Just honest. Because when you ask someone to defend something they clearly take for granted, and they have no words, that is power, that is clarity. That is leadership. Crockett was not just defending policy. She was defending the very idea that every voice matters. Even if some people in the room clearly forgot that. After that moment in the hearing, everything changed. The clip of Jasmine Crockett shutting down Lindsey Graham spread like wildfire. News channels picked it up within the hour. Social media lit up. Her calm, pointed words were everywhere. People were sharing the video not just for what she said, but for how she said it. Steady, smart, sharp. Commentators on both sides had to talk about it. Some tried to spin it. Others admitted it was a masterclass. But either way, Crockett had made her mark. Donors started to take notice too. Her campaign donations spiked in the following days. Grassroots support poured in, small dollar donors, first-time contributors. People who had never paid attention to Congress before were now backing her. Inside the Capitol, things shifted. Colleagues saw her differently. Some were inspired. Few were nervous. Because Crockett had shown what happens when someone speaks truth with facts and refuses to be dismissed. And as for Lindsey Graham, he stayed mostly quiet afterward. That silence spoke volumes. No tweets. No clarifications. No response that could match what she had delivered. That moment echoed far beyond that committee room. It started a ripple. And the fallout proved one thing. When you speak with purpose, people listen. And when the truth lands hard enough, it does not fade away. It grows. That moment between Jasmine Crockett and Lindsey Graham did more than go viral. It sparked conversations everywhere. Law schools started using it in classrooms. Professors pointed to it as a real-life example of calm, fact-based argument under pressure. It became a teaching tool for how to stand your ground with clarity and grace. On social media, young people shared it again and again. It was not just about politics. It was about voice. It was about power. It was about knowing your stuff and refusing to be sidelined. It spoke to a generation that wants leaders who bring both passion and receipts. Even in the corporate world, the clip found its way into leadership seminars and DEI training. Trainers used it to show how to handle bias, how to speak with confidence, and how to turn the energy in a room without shouting. One exchange in Congress ended up inspiring far beyond politics. And it is still being watched, studied, and felt. What Jasmine Crockett did in that moment was bigger than a clapback. It was a lesson in how to lead, how to stay sharp, and how to speak truth when it matters most. She showed that facts still matter. That dignity can win in a loud room. And that standing your ground with clarity can shift the whole conversation. For anyone watching, especially young people, future leaders, and those who feel unheard, it was a reminder that their voice counts. That knowledge is power. And that democracy depends on people willing to speak up and hold the line.